had this fantasy as a kid about swallowing an eyeball. It's a weird trip. Got tired of doing the old fantasies and decided to make them real. There's nothing to cut somebody's head off. I had done that, and I decided, no. She's pretty, I want to change pretty. That's what I found out. I was homicidal maniac.
The sight of Edmund Kemper III is an awesome experience in itself. He stands 6 feet 9 inches tall and weighs about 280 pounds. But the crimes with which he's been charged are even more awesome.
My dad was the first psychiatrist to speak with Kemper. I have the original tapes that he did when he was interviewing Kemper in jail prior to his trial. The defense attorneys asked him to go see him and determine if he was sane or not when he committed his crimes. Well, since 1973, I don't believe anybody has ever heard these tapes.
Yeah, so pissed in society. I said, screw it, I'm gonna nail the thing society likes the most.
So these are some artifacts that have been in storage for decades. And what I have on top here is a courtroom rendering of my dad when he was testifying. And as a young kid, I used to sit with the artists that would do these sketches. I'm Monty Lundy. I'm the eldest son of Donald T. Lundy. He was a psychiatrist involved in the Ed Kemper trial. This is a picture of my dad in his office with the 5 of us kids around the time that he was working on the Kemper case. I've actually got a photo of me and my dad. This was taken in 1973. He looks very young. I mean, to the day he died. I don't think he ever had a gray hair. You know, he was 5'8". He was not a very imposing person. Unless you started to debate him. Don't ever get in a debate with him. I learned that early on. And then I believe he was the youngest associate professor at Stanford University. At that time, he took me to jail when he was interviewing Ed Kemper, and so that was quite an experience for me. I had to wait in a waiting area, but I could still see the inner workings of the prison, could still hear everything. And there was just noise and clanging of bars and people yelling, and it's a very chaotic environment. And my dad went in and interviewed Ed Kemper for an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Damn, it is noisy in here. Yeah. What do you consider a little customer's badge?
Yeah, oh, they give you a thing when they came in.
Not much out of it.
They gave me the wrong one, though. They gave me an attorney. I think they ran out of the documents.
You know, he has a dry sense of humor, my dad does, and I got a little bit of that, you know, when he was talking about his badge, and they must have thought I was an attorney or something like that. But, you know, that's the way he was kind of disarming and would, you know, talk to these people like a normal person. because he wanted to build a level of trust with him.
Well, there are some specific things I'm going to have to ask you about the various victims and things that relate to your state of mind.
Suddenly, just pops in my mind the act of killing, what it was like. Little flashbacks, like it just bugged this shit out. I started in May last year in Santa Cruz.
I'm looking at 2 photos of myself. Think, God, boy, was I ever young. I'm Louita Spangler, and I got my bachelor's degrees at UC Santa Cruz. I went to university there in 1971. The university itself had only been running for 6 years. It's like the whole universe opened up. I was young and healthy, and I felt like I could do anything. We were pushing against the 1950s set, that said women go to college to get a Mrs. degree. Okay, that was the joke, We didn't get bachelor's degrees, we got Mrs. degrees. At that time also, women who went to university were called co-eds. Co-ed was basically a shortening of coeducational. It meant that the universities were taking both men and women, but only women were called co-eds. And the term co-ed was sexualized. I can't tell you the number of pornography films that featured the word co-eds, co-eds in bed, co-eds get it on. It was that kind of world that we were seeking to break apart. The campus itself is up on a hill. In fact, one of the things that they frequently talked about was the city on the hill. And it was outside of the town itself. We had to get around. Many of us had jobs. We didn't have the money for cars. There were buses, but they had a very limited time of operation, so we hitchhiked.
Hi, come on in.
It was really interesting. You got to meet people. You didn't have to pay money. And as newly independent women, feeling our power, we hitchhiked.
One thing I liked about Santa Cruz is there'd be a lot of girls. That was my target.
What was the first killing? Because I haven't gotten the chronology and stuff yet.
First time was 2 girls. The time sensitive. That was my friend speaking of. And the facade. I have to appear sane to everybody. First girl had very large, beautiful, light blue eyes. Huge. They turned me on.
My name is Michael Alufi. People call me Mickey. It's a nickname that I got from my mother many years ago. I was born and raised here in Santa Cruz. In the summer of 1972, that was about the time that I was assigned to the Detective Bureau. The typical crime in Santa Cruz in those days was, thefts, disturbances, juvenile issues, things of that nature. But in 1972, things started to break loose.
The Hayward Hill. First, it was scary, doing something like that, because there's a hell of a lot of risk.
Okay. And then, how were they killed?
through the night. She was very messy. I left them in Santa Cruz County at the Mountains.
We're situated right now in the Loma Prieta Mountains, and back in 1972 there were some hikers that were in this area and they found a human skull off the side of the road. Yeah. It had deteriorated to the point where it was unidentifiable. We couldn't tell if it was a male or female. It's a shocking discovery to find a human head without a body attached to it. What sort of animal could do something like that to a human being? We searched the area for remains and could not locate anything. We had nothing to go on as far as recognition. We didn't have any missing person reports. It was just so limiting, you really couldn't do a heck of a lot.
Threw away a lot of, evidence, things like that, bloody rags, old bloody newspapers, things that cops could use as leads. You don't want to give them any leads at all. One fingerprint they got me.
The person who did it obviously is still on the loose, so we didn't know exactly what's going to transpire. But it was the beginning of a nightmare for Santa Cruz County.
Yeah, my sister came by yesterday, or the day before.
The younger sister who lives in Santa Cruz now?
Oh, we were real tight sidekicks. That was way back when I was a kid. She was my confidant.
I have another tape here that is Aylin Burke, which is Kemper's younger sister. My dad always found it was good to get kind of corroborating information. So he reached out to Kemper's younger sister to understand what caused him to be who he is or who he was, and asked if he could interview her, and she accepted.
You're Ed's younger sister, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how much younger are you?
About 2 years.
And how old are you?
22.
We start out just with the family background. Do you remember much of living with your father?
He didn't get emotionally close to us as children. He did reject us a lot. I remember not wanting to hold us, or, like we'd get up on his lap and he'd say that we were too heavy for him. My mom has always said that she noticed changes in my brother from about the age 2 because of rejection.
I'm Dr. Catherine Ramsland, and I teach forensic psychology. And for 25 years, I've been writing on mass murderers and serial killers. I've studied Ed Kemper, and I had a brief correspondence with him as well. Edmund Kemper was born on December 18, 1948, in Burbank, California. He had a sister who was 5 years older than him, and Alan, 2 years younger, so he was the middle child. Apparently, his father, Edmund Jr., was kind of a weak man, and Clarnell, his mother, was the dominant influence. His father was a World War II veteran who became an electrician at Pacific Proving Grounds working with atomic energy. And he famously made the statement that working with atomic energy was far preferable to being around Clarnell.
I know my mom and him fought a lot then. I can remember that. They didn't get along and they'd argue. A few things that my mom has said, like, he spent a lot of money and wasn't responsible. And he'd go out and drink.
Remember how he felt about your brother or how they got along?
I can never remember my brother and him ever having a relationship, a father-son relationship.
Clarnell and her husband both had been disciplinarians, not showing much affection, which wasn't really that unusual for the 1950s, but it did affect the children. In Ed Kemper's case, he loses his sense of self-esteem, his sense of confidence. And that became worse when his father divorced his mother. That made the sense of rejection even stronger.
Santa Cruz in the early 70s was an area of peace and love, and it was kind of the age of Aquarius. People were feeling free and happy. And for somebody like me at 24 years old, it was a lot of fun. My name is Tom Honig. I was a reporter at the Santa Cruz Sentinel in the early 1970s. I was a cub reporter hired to do what was traditionally the beginning news beat, which was police and courts. Little did I know that the police beat was going to be the biggest beat on the newspaper, because all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they found a skull up in the mountains near Loma Prieta.
The sheriff's office didn't have hardly any homicides in those days. So we did not have a whole lot of experience in doing this sort of thing. I was the brand new detective at the time, and so it suddenly became my case. Sometimes you challenge yourself, am I up for this? There was one computer for the sheriff's office, which was in the basement. It was a very antiquated system, but I could do an inquiry. I could go into the computer, find somebody's criminal history, that sort of thing.
Evidence in crimes of violence, such as this bloody garment, is examined by an expert from the hairs and fibers unit of the laboratory.
We had no DNA in that period. And in fact, a lot of times we refer to this as the golden age of criminalistics. And the reason we do that is we used all sorts of other technology to do our work. Microscopes, the fingerprint work, and that type of thing. From the head, you can reconstruct what the person looked like on the skull. But Santa Cruz County is a coastal county. It tends to be warm in the summer, so you would get a fairly fast decomposition. So within, say, perhaps 6 weeks to a couple of months, most of the flesh should be gone. But the recovery of a good skull, you can get an age, you can get whether it's male or female usually, but the teeth obviously are crucial.
We access the files in the state computer for missing persons. They also will include dental charts. So we got those dental charts, compared them to the one that we had from the skull. And it was the head of Marianne Pesch, who was a student out of Fresno.
When they identified her, all I had ever seen was a photo of her. She seemed like a very attractive young woman. And the thought came up, how in the world would this happen?
Well, my name is Terry Medina, and my partner was Mickey Alufi. We shared an office together, and we were good friends. We worked a lot of cases together. Marianne Pesh was reported missing with her best friend, Anita Luquesa. Both disappeared from the Alameda County area. Both were students. The detectives in Alameda came up with a person that saw them getting into a car. And that's about as far as we got at that time with those two cases.
It does depress me an awful lot.
To talk about this?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, what was next then?
Third victim. It's quite a trip down the face. I think, wow, what she would think if she knew that 8 or 10 hours later, she'd be laying on somebody's truck dead. The next day in so many pieces.
In 1957, Clarnell got a job in Helena, Montana. So she is going to raise the 3 children as a single mother. And this is the point at which the kids now have to adjust to a whole new place of living. And Ed begins to create bizarre games that they would play. These activities turned up in some of Lundy's interviews with the younger sister, Alan.
I can remember a lot of strange things happening as we grew up. My grandparents sent me up a doll in a food chest with all handmade clothes and stuff. And one day I opened it up to play with her, and her hands were cut off. Cut her hands, which is weird.
He's begun to think about death stories and death images.
Were you ever aware of having any fantasies or dreams?
I remember him talking about gas chamber. Like he was gonna go to a gas chamber or something, and I was a gas chamber man. That was scary.
That his fantasies would become death fantasies is really not surprising, because that's really a fantasy of total control over others.
We had a cat, and he was mad at it one day. And so we took a swing and cut off his head with a bayonet. And we wrapped the cat piece in his backpack, and then we put it in the suitcase.
Who found it?
My mom.
We do see animal cruelty in the past of many serial killers, especially if that serial killer then goes on to target women or girls.
So this is a memory box in memory of Aiko. It's a clipping from a newspaper article when we performed for UN Day at Lake Merritt in Oakland. So I met Aiko when I was about 12 years old. I met her through our Korean dance classes in San Francisco. We were both only children, being raised by single mothers. We were almost like sisters. And like any 12-year-old girls, we just nonstop talking. It was a nonstop conversation. This is a diary that I kept when I was a teenager, and I'm actually sharing this for the first time. I haven't actually looked at this diary for many years. Today, Aiko called me, and we went up to the Berkeley UC campus to feed the squirrels. Last night, we ate fudge and did a drip candle. March 11th, 1972, met Aiko. She's really changed. This is the last entry of Aiko in my diary. The last time I saw Aiko, I was waiting for the bus. And across the street, I saw Aiko. I was all excited because I hadn't seen her for a while. And then as I was looking at her, she put her thumb out. She was going to hitchhike. And I just was in shock. We're only 15 years old. Oh my goodness. And I was waving to get her attention. She didn't see me because there's all the cars. It's a busy street. And my bus shows up. And I get on the bus.
Third one was the Aiko Koo girl.
Well, where'd you pick her up?
From Berkeley.
What did you talk about?
We talked for about 2.5 hours. What she had done in school and what was wrong with me and this and that. I was acting like I was about to commit suicide. I told her that she'd been abducted. She was very cooperative. Didn't ask me to do anything sexual. I never laid my hands on her until I put tape over her mouth.
I had heard at some point from Berkeley Police Department that they were missing a young Asian girl. They would have done the same thing that we would do with missing persons in those days. They could have treated it as a kidnapping if there were more evidence that that had occurred. But at that point, they felt it was just a runaway juvenile.
There were so many runaways that were being reported missing by their parents. They weren't missing with suspicious circumstances necessarily. The parents were just saying, my kid is gone. Now the difference here is Aiko Koo, because her mom knew she was supposed to be at a dance studio, knew what bus she was supposed to take. She never showed up at that dance studio. And her memory kind of faded into the missing person files.
I know that Mrs. Koo, her mom, had put posters out trying to get the community to look out for Aiko. Have you seen her? Get in contact with her. You know, Aiko was all she, was so much of her life. And I can only imagine her heart was just, breaking, trying to find out what happened to her girl.
I took her back to my apartment. took pictures of her after she was dead. I posed her and asked her to pose and took up the pictures. I got a little tired of it real quick.
I read the newspaper article the following week, and it had Aiko's picture on it. And then I thought to myself, oh God, Hazel, maybe you should have just missed the bus. Maybe you should have just ran over and tried to talk to her.
So how'd you dispose of that body?
I dissected her, dismembered her body in the bathtub, and cleaned up her real nice. You couldn't have told anything that's going on in there.
She was truly a bright star. She was gonna be somebody. She was gonna do things. And she was just truly a lovely individual.
When Clarnell took her children to Montana, she was faced with having to divvy up bedrooms. She gave her 2 daughters their own bedroom, and there was a room in the basement that she apparently thought would work for a 9-year-old boy. He began to think that he'd been relegated to this dungeon, cave-like place.
Was the idea that by putting him alone in a scary place, that would make him more man?
He was pretty young, but it was a big pain to him. And it was dark. You couldn't turn the light on till after you were down there. And he was really afraid of that, and he had a lot of bad dreams.
Do you remember him being terrified or scared?
Sometimes he screamed in his sleep.
Did he wet the bed?
Yeah, he did. And that's when I first noticed him start being afraid of people.
This young boy is growing up with the feeling that he's the rejected child, the unwanted child, and his anger began to simmer.
You said that it was at that time that you started getting weird ideas?
Yeah. Weird dreams, strange fantasies about my mother.
Such as what?
See, resentment started building up. There was a big love-hate conflict that started building up between us.
What were the fantasies you had about her?
I think it was back then I started with this whole fantasy about being able to kill the whole world if I prayed to him. I just decided that I had such a rapport with God. If I asked him real hard, everybody just died.
Ed didn't want to live with his mother anymore. So in the fall of 1963, he got on a bus and went down to California to find his father and reconnect. His father had a glamorous new wife, Elfrida, and Elfrida found Ed to be kind of creepy.
She was a very good-looking German woman. I used to have fantasies about her. I used to get her kind of uptight, just sit somewhere and stare at her.
And there's a story that at one point he glimpsed her undressed in the bedroom, and after that she just wanted him out of the house.
My brother heard my dad talk about him, saying that he's always causing problems in his new life. My brother with his crying and everything.
Frida was not going to put up with this boy living with them. So Ed's father decides during Christmas to take Ed to see his parents, who have this sort of isolated ranch or farm in North Fork, California, about 250 miles away, supposedly for a visit for the holidays. And then when Dad left, he left his son there with them. Essentially, he had duped him. He had tricked him into going, and Ed had no way of leaving. He is now living an isolated, lonely life with no sense of what should he do? Where should he go from here?
Picked up probably 200 girls over the last 2 or 3 years.
Okay, so now you didn't kill all 200, right?
Right. Picked up a couple of really nice gals. But they were, there's too many cars around, too many people watching them get in. They might remember the next day.
So you let them go?
Yeah. Took them where they wanted to go, no sweat. Never committed myself unless I was sure.
We would talk to a lot of the people who are actually hitchhiking. We tell them what the risk is and try to encourage them to not do that.
Of course, people were alarmed, but we're not getting very much information from the police other than these general, don't go hitchhiking, don't walk in the woods, don't go into deserted neighborhoods. These lists of don'ts. This was not going to happen.
People basically ignored the advice.
It's a harassment campaign to stop hitchhiking.
They just didn't want to do what the police were telling them to do.
Ultimately we didn't trust the police, but they probably didn't trust us either. Because we were busy organizing anti-Vietnam War demonstrations. So there was mutual distrust on both sides.
The community were thinking that it must be an outsider or some kind of an outside cult that invaded the county. Some commune hippie cult that had something to do with these murders. But as time went along, we kind of rejected that. We thought the suspect has to know this area pretty well, including the backwoods. So we were thinking somebody local at that time. We're always looking for a break in a case. I believe we would get one. I just prayed to God that we could do it before any more people were murdered.
I was about 14 years old when a new kid moved in next door to us, and his name was Ed Kemper. I lived for a while in this house. It was in slightly better condition, but the house up on the hill was where I was living at the time. Ed was living with his grandmother, Maud, and his grandfather here in this house. The grandmother wrote stories for children, and Granddad was retired.
They wouldn't let him bring any friends home or get into any social activities in the high school. And they gave him a rifle and a dog and told him to go are gophers, and he couldn't watch cartoons or read comics and stuff. And so it was really hard on him up there.
Is that when he told you about how strict they were and so on?
He didn't want to stay there, but he wouldn't tell anybody. And, like, he would hold a lot of things in. In fact, I'm probably one of the only ones that he would tell things to.
Ed and I were in the same class. We were both freshmen at a regional high school. Me being the shortest and him being probably the tallest, I'd always joke about, well, if you pick on me, you're going to have to deal with Ed. We would joke around about stuff like that. He seemed to be getting along well with people. He was quiet, and he was new to a rural community, which would be a big change for anybody.
Were you in trouble in school much?
Oh, yeah, I always hated school. I'd been ridiculed for a long time about my height. There'd be a lot of girls from school and stuff. They'd be giggling because of my height. And I was thinking they were laughing at me instead of something constructive. That's why I had fantasies about blowing them all away with my gun.
To get this complete, your grandparents, do you remember what the date of that was?
Yeah, August 27, 1964.
Ed's grandfather was out buying groceries, and Ed was in the kitchen with his grandmother, who was working on the proofs for one of her books. He picked up his rifle, called the dog, he was going to go out, and she yelled after him, "Don't shoot the birds."
We got a knock on the door, and it was Kip Herring, a deputy sheriff, and he was inquiring about where the Kempers lived. And I remember being struck by how nervous he seemed. He was smoking a cigarette, and he seemed very, very anxious. We had no idea, but it seemed like it must be serious if the deputy sheriff was responding to it.
I shot her twice in the head and once in the back. But she was dead after the first shot.
He talked later about the fact that he kind of lost control of his body, he kind of blacked out. And then he heard his grandfather getting groceries out of the car. So he decided, in a split moment, to just kill grandfather too.
And they were both shot?
Yeah, with a 22 rifle.
Did it feel good while you were doing it?
Yeah, there was a relief at doing that, striking out at the people that was hurting me the most.
It was just like, what? I can't believe that. A lot of other kids I went to school with, I had figured as murderers, but not him.
He would probably not have had any sense of the enormity of what he's done as a 15-year-old committing a double homicide, but he certainly would know things are going to change. He knows this is a turning point.
The residents of this area understandably are edgy. They're asking themselves, is the killer still around these parts? It was just 6 months ago that a human head was found in the hills not too far from here, and the details of that murder still are a mystery.
How about the cutting off the head?
I guess it was an old Knights in Shining Armor thing where I kill them and cut their head off. And hold it up high and all this. Not so much as a trophy as the prettiest part of a good-looking woman's body is her hand.
My dad interviewed Kemper over several months. Each time he went in, they would develop a little bit more of a relationship. And at the time, they didn't really have a category for the type of killer that Ed Kemper was. He really wanted to get into the mind of the killer and figure out what were the causal factors in making him go from a normal human being to a sociopathic killer.
Local people don't think Santa Cruz is the murder capital of the world, but there is concern, short of alarm, that a killer may still be at large.
Gruesome details. Skull found in a remote Loma Prieta. So these are newspapers from the time when it happened. This is my local history. This is Santa Cruz history. These murders changed Santa Cruz. It impacted so many people in the community, and it was something that we talked about a lot in our family. Ed Kemper, he was my boogeyman. He was our family's boogeyman. There are so many rumors about Kemper and what he did, what he didn't do. So many outrageous stories. It's interesting to me to get to the bottom and try to see where the truth lies.
Okay, fellas, move on in.
After Kemper murdered his grandparents, he was sent to a Atascadero, which is basically a mental hospital for adults.
Okay, fellas, be seated.
So here's a 15-year-old boy, massive, but he's still 15 years old, in this facility with other adults. There were 1,600 inmates. 24 of them were murderers, and 800 of them were sex offenders.
It's pretty feared person, I'll tell you. Wrong word in the wrong place, and I got killed in Atascadero, just as easy as prison.
During your teenage formative years, this is the company that he grew up with. And I believe it was the other inmates that taught him, if you're going to rape somebody, you need to kill him. You need to get rid of the evidence. You can't leave anyone alive.
They put him through a battery of tests and gave him this label of sociopathic disorder, antisocial, and that he was a passive-aggressive type of person. Kemper had a facade of being polite and cooperative, because that had worked for him in many ways. He would pretend to be normal, pleasing, good manners, at the same time having these aggressive, nasty fantasies about killing people.
Nobody had the idea that I had the hostile, super violent things on me. Atascadero didn't let me know anything about the fantasy.
Is there any way you ever would have told anybody at Atascadero?
No, because I was really itching to get out. I had to do every little thing right, because one little thing wrong could have blown the whole ball whack.
Because his IQ score came up in the superior range, the psychiatrist thought that maybe it would be good to give him more responsibility. And so when he wants to help them handle the psychological tests, that seems like a good idea to them.
Who'd you work for?
All the psychiatrists in the hospital.
What were you doing?
I started out sharpening pencils at 17, and when I was 19, I worked my way through giving out the tests, scoring them, filing them.
Kemper's genius was the manipulation of getting the psychiatrists and psychologists to actually allow him to see the contents of the test so he could memorize them in order to get passable scores on these tests and be able to get out.
You got familiar with the various tests at Atascadero then working in psychology, did you?
All of them. That was perfect. I got an honorable discharge, which qualified me for having my records sealed.
The sealing of the records, meaning they're still there, but nobody gets access to them. Future employers would not be able to find out if he had, in fact, a juvenile record.
Edmund Kemper was released from Atascadero in 1969. They felt like he was cured. They felt like he was going to be an upstanding citizen the rest of his life.
When Kemper got out of Atascadero, he saw a different world than when he went in. From 1964 to 1969, the world had changed. There was the hippie revolution, the summer of love in 1967, women going to college and being independent. Kemper was a conservative kind of guy. He was a square. He dressed like a square. He couldn't fit in with these long-haired hippies. He began to feel like, they were worthless type of people. But what he really saw were all these women hitchhiking alone. They're flaunting their freedom. That's just not okay, so they should be punished.
The grisly story began in this cove. The upper part of a girl's torso washed up on this beach 2 miles north of the Santa Cruz Pier. Then a hand was found 2 days later by a surfer who was in the water near Capitola, 7 miles to the southeast.
A highway patrol officer found body parts over the cliff over down by Carmel, which is about 20 to 25 miles across the bay. About 7 days later, a torso washed up here on the city of Santa Cruz. Subsequently, the torso and the other body parts were matched together with x-rays. They did fingerprints and everything and determined that it was Cynthia Shaw who was reported missing here in Santa Cruz.
Where'd you pick her up?
On mission. The worst point was leading up to it, And when I had them sufficiently scared, then I'd handcuff them or tie them up or something. I just bought myself a brand new 22 automatic pistol. I just received it from the store. I just pointed the gun at her in the car and kept on going down the freeway, still letting her off at Cabrillo College.
I think this is one of my favorite pictures of Forrest and Cynthia. She just has the sweetest face and the sweetest disposition, and it's just adorable.
Cynthia was 18. She was going to Cabrillo College in Santa Cruz. And she lived with a family and took care of the kids in her off-school hours. She was very much looking forward to getting a car. That was a point of contention with her mother, my mother. She didn't have a car, and that's why she ended up hitchhiking. My mother called me and she said that Cynthia is missing. The parents that Cynthia was taking care of the children let my mom know that she hasn't been home in 3 days.
When Cynthia disappeared and we heard nothing, I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I felt something was very, very wrong.
And then finally pulled it back towards Santa Cruz into the mountains. I'm talking to getting in the trunk of her brains out. This first one ever shot anybody with a 22 in her eye stayed open. Her eyes wide open.
I got the news on the TV that she had been murdered. The whole family was just devastated. We all came together to be with my mother, and we had a service for Cynthia. Here's a nice picture of Candy and Cynthia. Candace was my other sister. She was never the same. She became a drug addict, and she died when she was about 33. So it basically destroyed our family.
I lost a best friend, and I still miss her today.
But when Cynthia Shaw went missing, and it was in the newspaper, Kemper's sister asked him, "Hey, you didn't have anything to do with this disappearance, did you?" So she suspected something.
I've been reading about it in the papers. For some reason, it just kept bothering me and bothering me. And all of a sudden, it just flashed in my mind, that cat, when you cut off the head. Oh my God. So one night, to please my own curiosity, I went over there with intentions to ask him. In his bedroom, he was always in there watching TV. I said, just between me and you didn't have anything to do with those murders, did you? And he kind of sat up and he said, I figured you'd ask me about that. He says, I thought you'd get suspicious. He said, Mom was suspicious too. He said, she mentioned it, so don't even talk to her about it. He said, it'll just turn into a big mess.
She's with you. I don't know what she's got in her mouth.
My uncle took care of Cynthia's body because he was a mortician. He wouldn't even tell us anything. It was such horrendous way to go.
I forgot all about this poem.
Yeah.
The simple songs of years gone by come back to me today, reminding me of happiness I had along the way. The songs I sang when I was young and life was bright and new. The melodies that made me cry when I was feeling blue. Cindy Shaw, 72.
People are definitely uptight. They don't know exactly what we have running loose around here, and they're very concerned.
Why are all these murders here? Well, one reason is that we have a homicidal maniac, apparently, who's been running around.
I would go visit the Santa Cruz Police and Santa Cruz Sheriff's Department detectives on a daily basis, saying, what the hell is going on here? And the police were saying, we just don't know, we just don't have any clues. But at the time Santa Cruz was so small, there was a very limited police department. Most of the cops were local kids who had grown up and they hadn't had training in major investigations.
There was a lot of discussion about why These bodies have been dismembered. Is it somebody that knows how to dismember? Could it be somebody that was at one time a butcher, a doctor, or somebody like that? So our discussions now about the totality of these murder cases really starts to focus on somebody that is very smart. This does not now seem to us to be some outraged monster killer randomly doing things on the spur of the moment. This is somebody that is thinking about what they are doing.
He was getting better as a killer. He had what he called his murder car. He had his murder clothes that were dark. If they got stained with blood, people wouldn't be able to see. He had his car with the handle latch that he could reach across, drop a little chapstick in the door so they couldn't open it again from the inside. He knew how to commit crimes that were very hard to detect. It's the age-old issue of across districts, across counties, across law enforcement agencies. And Kemper was smart. He knew that. He knew he was going to pick up over here, he was going to kill over here, he was going to dump over here, he was going to massacre these bodies beyond recognition, try to make identification impossible. I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people in law enforcement felt like he was a genius.
My mother lived in Aptos, which is a residential district close to the center. These houses are packed all around us.
At Atascadero, they said when he is released, he should not be released into the custody of his mother. Because his mother is the precipitating factor for a lot of his anger. But in their infinite wisdom, the California Youth Authority released Kemper into the custody of his mother.
I was living with my mother and not contributing financially at all. And that'd be my goal, so I ended up pumping gas and shit like that.
My name is Jim Connor. This is me, 70s, and you see how beautiful I am. Before I went to work for the police department, I worked at a local tire shop, and I would take tires to small businesses around Santa Cruz. And one of those businesses was this gas station where Ed worked. My first impression of him when I first met him is that, oh my God, this guy's a giant. You know, he had a great personality, easy to talk to. He's just kind of a guy's kind of guy. As far back as I can remember, I always had a desire to be a cop. And I became a full-fledged police officer in 1970. One of the first things I did is I took my police car and I drove down to show myself off to Ed. He came out and I remember just being so proud. I talked to him a lot about being a police officer, and you're a big guy, you'd make a great cop. And he would say, no, you know, they wouldn't take me. And he had his reasons for saying that. I didn't have a clue what he was talking about. I just figured that it wasn't his cup of tea, so to speak.
I was 21 years old. Sexually, I was still about 15 years old. which is pretty arresting.
Meaning what? You had never had intercourse?
I'd never been on a date until I got out. That's where I started feeling intimidated because of my lack of knowledge and no expertise at all with girls. I thought it was sterile, so it was another thing. How do you folks?
Impotent?
Well, impotent is where you can't get a hard on, right? Well, I get a hard on, but nothing came out. I would give up too quick. You know, I get really discouraged and then hold it all in.
This spot is just a stone's throw from the Santa Cruz campus of the University of California. It's not far from here that just a week ago today, 4 more bodies were discovered in a connected series of unsolved murders in this area.
By January of '73, we had about 13 different homicides that we were investigating, which is a huge number for Santa Cruz area. Most of our homicides were gunshots. People in the counterculture, lifestyle, that sort of thing. Some hitchhikers. It was just going crazy.
We were reeling under the strain of just the amount of crime. A woman and her 2 young sons were found murdered in their tiny cabin. And if it can get any more bizarre, it does. The killing of a Catholic priest found in a confessional in his church, stabbed to death.
The volume of the homicides, it is very overwhelming, but you look at each one and you try to piece them together. Are these cases related? What's my next step? And then boom, there's another murder. So it just keeps piling up and piling up. I'm thinking, well, is this one person? Is this 2 people? Is it more than that? What's going on? I don't know how much more I can handle.
Hills beautiful and green for walking, camping, fishing, just coming someplace where it's nice. Those things remain, but there is a horrible overlay to it all now, for this is also the area in which 13 murders have been committed in the past 6 weeks.
Santa Cruz is a perfect area for these types of crimes. It's very rare to have a city where you can be downtown and within 5 to 10 minutes, you're out in the forest in the middle of nowhere with nobody around.
It's remote and very hidden in places. So people that are trying to hide or get rid of a body, it is the perfect place to do it. At least the co-eds at the University of Santa Cruz and at Cabrillo College started to take the message of don't hitchhike seriously. And we did see a change.
Do you hitchhike?
Only if absolutely necessary. And only with females now.
Why?
Well, I'm afraid.
Why did you quit?
Because of all the weird things that have been happening with the rapes and girls being chopped up and things like that.
We were working 6 and 7 days a week, 12, 14 hours a day, trying to get a handle on all this stuff. At this point, we had no clues. We went for quite a while without any suspect whatsoever. The guy was covered his tracks really well.
We'll get back to your mother. What was your mother's name?
I don't know, Strandberg.
And she worked at UC?
Yeah. She was administrative assistant to one of the college provosts.
My name is Isabel Grun.
I joined the UCSC in 1960. I worked with Clarnell Stramberg at Stevenson College. I was a faculty member. She was the administrative assistant to the provost. My impression of Clarnell at first was that she was shy. Sometimes when I passed her door and she didn't seem to be doing anything, I would just greet her and say, "How are you?" She was not very chatty. She would say, "Oh, things are not easy." One day I saw a very tall young man pick her up in a car, some kind of sedan. Many of us those days had, Volkswagens and small cars, and it was a biggish car. So I sort of said to her, "Is this a relative of yours?" And she said, "Oh yes, that's my son." He was a tall young man who didn't dress or look any different than lots of student types. He didn't look suspicious, he didn't look creepy. But I can tell you, I never saw any kind of interaction like hugging or somebody putting his arm or her arm around the other or anything of the sort. Do I think she was carrying a burden? I think so.
Was he affectionate with your mother, or with you for that matter? I mean, like, would he kiss her? Or...
Kiss her goodnight. Something like that.
Donald Lundy, as part of his attempt to learn about Kemper, also interviewed Kemper's younger sister. He talked to Alan and got more from her in terms of corroboration and perspective on the family.
Would she make you feel guilty when you were crazy? She'd always say, "You don't love me," and this kind of thing. She could be really harsh. When she'd get uptight, you're mad, she could really cut to the bone, and she did that a lot to my brother. She'd just strip him down and say, "You're just like your father." She really did talk a lot when she should have shut him up. I mean, there's a point where you just don't push people any further, and she'd always pass that by.
In a way, he's replicating his father's relationship with her. His father was already a role model of this is how you deal with Clarnell. You yell at her.
You should have known my mother. She loved to pull people's strings and watch you really get unwound,
You'd rather waste your life laying in front of the TV set all day long.
The famous phrase was,
"Well, when you get to be 52, you better tell me how it is."
my mother had always wanted a solid family, but my old man blew it for her, she fucked around all the time. What I liked about him was he was such a perfectionist. I guess I was born with a thing for perfection, doing things to a T. So I was always striving for that.
Kemper has now become his father and has the same acrimonious relationship with his mother that his father had had.
Did your mother drink?
She started drinking a lot of vodka and whiskey and really depressed, just barely keeping her job up at the university. And her and my brother were having a lot of problems. And that's when they'd start fighting, when she was drinking and when he was drinking.
Kemper and Clarnell were both raging alcoholics. They both drank a lot. They were not afraid to speak their mind. I think he said one of their biggest fights was about whether he should get his teeth cleaned. Benign issues that would explode.
I started building resentments, and as I built the resentments, while the hostility had pent up, I started falling back on old fantasies. I was down on real good looking, smart-ass rich girls. Really uptight about it because I couldn't communicate with them. I couldn't compete with the poor little rich boys around town. I had an inferiority complex. Never did get over it. I was superior when I had girls.
I would have to say that the community was on edge and with no suspects, wanting the police to do more because they felt like that they were maybe next in line. Every agency had their local watering hole. Ours was the jury room. And we talk about the cases that we worked that day.
And this is where police officers would go after work to unwind. I used to go there and have a couple of drinks on my way home. You would have officers from Santa Cruz Police Department, maybe even the Highway Patrol, district attorneys, investigators, that sort of thing.
And Ed would come there once in a while and have a beer with us.
You had kind of hung around with some of the cops, the jury room bar and so on.
Yeah, that's what they're oftentimes drinking. Water hole. Yeah, I couldn't stand being on the roads. I found that when I was by myself, there was a tension that built up, especially after I did what I did.
Basically, you like cops to do.
I wish there was one.
He was kind of quiet. He would sit there and not be a major part of the conversation, but he was just basically listening and having his beer.
I sit there and have 5 or 6 beers and then I'd have 7 tequilas in a row. I'm putting on an idiot act. So I played like a goofy little kid all the time I was out. And nobody would think Ed could do such horrible things.
I couldn't go anywhere without somebody asking me about what is happening, or updates on the homicides, or how close are we to arresting somebody. We had no clue at that point who this person might be. We had no clues whatsoever.
The cops were looking for somebody really slick and sly, and I wasn't. Ed's just a meatball. He's a nice guy, but he just doesn't do anything. Sometimes I felt real cute inside at that point, I fooled everybody so completely. At other times, I feel real grief because they're sitting there bullshitting about what kind of girls were probably hitchhiking, what kind of creep is killing them. And I knew who it was, and who was doing it.
I think a survival skill for Ed Kemper is being what he needs to be for any given circumstance. Some of the things we know about the psychopath's brain is they don't have deep commitment to any given identity. They can be whatever they need to be because they have no commitment to the truth. If it means telling you a different story than what they've tried to tell you and you're not buying, they'll flip to that story. They don't care.
Did you ever make believe he was going to kill you?
One time when we were kids, and he was cleaning my dad's 22 rifle. I guess you could call it my brother's, since my dad was in Memphis. We were down in the living room, we by ourselves, and it went off. And it was aimed towards me, but I moved about an inch out of the way and it went into the bookcase. And I'd never questioned anything if it was intentional or anything, because he just said, wow, oops.
I first met Rosalind and got to know her because we were both taking women's studies classes, and we were both lesbians, and so we were basically in the same circle of people. And she was really good at making pie. And everybody was always happy when she would come to a potluck with one of her pies. If you could think of a, you know, a feminist lesbian who is all American, that was Roz.
I assure you, nobody stands very gently and puts their hands on your throat. They choke you and they put you down on that floor and you're down. It's this manner.
Here's Alice. She was in the same karate class as me. Neither one of us was skillful. We were beginners, but she was into it. She could kick well. She was very supple, and it certainly wasn't a self-defense because we felt like there was no need. We felt immortal. February is when they both disappeared.
After Cynthia Shaw, what was next?
Rosalind Thorpe and Alice Liu.
You picked them up together?
One right after the other. I don't think the Liu girl would have gotten my car. But she looked like she was a very, very cautious hitchhiker anyway. She waited until she could see somebody in the car before she started playing with them out.
So you already had Rosalind in the car?
Yeah, in front. They looked like a couple, you know. And then on top of that, I had an A sticker. So I could park where I wanted it. And I'm sure she
How'd you get that?
My mother.
He convinced her to get him an A permit. An A permit is a parking permit up on UC Santa Cruz. He told her that he wanted to go to the library. So anyone hitchhiking would see this A permit on his car and think, oh, this is another student, this is faculty member or staff member, and would assume that it was safe. Additionally, at that time, they had guards posted at the entrance of UC Santa Cruz. If you had an A permit, right on through.
The police were not really proactive. Their initial reaction every time a woman disappeared was, oh, you know, girls of that age, they frequently just go off. They'll be back. These were not people who were running away from home. Roz was not running away from her housemate. These were people who were already living an independent life. They had nothing to run away from.
And their parents were adamant that they would not hitchhike. They would not accept rides. They were last seen on the campus, not hitchhiking off the campus someplace. So yes, we did get focused on students and faculty, trying to get a focus on a possible motive.
And then one of the sort of weird suspicions that arose was, well, if they don't get in cars with men, maybe they would get in car with a woman. And that could be some kind of lesbian thing.
At one point, and this was kind of interesting, they interviewed me and asked me questions circling around the lesbian community. And I was, you know, basically freaked out.
Follow me. Captain, more of the other boys are, you'll need to spread out in there to cover the flatland.
Well, when the girls disappeared, there was a very large-scale search of the campus area, the last place that the girls were seen.
When you call me, just call me command post.
I participated in an organized search. They separated us into groups according to the difficulty of the terrain. We were going through the Santa Cruz Mountains. And I was very fit, so I participated in the group that went through the rough terrain. And they had us in a grid 6 feet apart about. And what I really remember is that while I was walking, looking carefully on either side of me, it was Roz's voice that I was hearing within me. I could hear the tenor of her voice. And I think it was a way of keeping her alive. But it became clearer and clearer to me that I wasn't looking for somebody who had broken her leg or something like that. We were looking for a body.
Alice Liu and Rosalind Thorpe were last seen February 5th. The bodies were discovered east of Castro Valley. Both girls had been decapitated, and the hands from one body had been cut off.
We knew that it was Rosalind and Al through their clothing, and they had been shot to death.
Once that information had come through, that spread instantly throughout the community. Each one of us went into ourselves with our individual reactions to that kind of level of horror. That level of nightmare, it was beyond our imagination.
At the same time as the discovery of the latest victims, we got probably one of the biggest breaks that we've had in any of these cases. There was a shooting in the city of Santa Cruz. A description was put out of a particular vehicle, and that vehicle was stopped a couple of miles away, and the person was arrested.
A 25-year-old Felton area resident has been charged with multiple murders. Authorities are operating with the theory that the murders are linked with drugs.
Herbert Mullen, age 25, has previously been charged with the murder of members of the Gunnera family, Francis family, and Fred Paris.
We started to piece together his life. People knew him as Herbie. He took hallucinant drugs, LSD, a lot of pot.
Herbert Mullen was killing people for crazy reasons. He had a strange theory that by killing somebody, then that would lessen the chance of a killer earthquake coming in.
He matched the description of the person who was seen at previous homicides. Which homicides? All of them. We had no clue whatsoever. We were kind of hoping that he was the one that was responsible for all of them. So we began to feel a little bit better about ourselves.
When law enforcement caught Mullen, the community took a big sigh of relief. They thought this was over, the nightmare was over. The serial killer had been caught.
We know he's killed 10 people. So that's 10 of how many other murders would we have?
Herbert Mullen has been accused in 10 of the 15 murders tied to this South Coast community. However, Mullen's alleged connection with death has not involved the cutting up of the victims.
Once we had Mullen, we knew that we had him for some of the homicides and probably a good number of them. But that was only the ones where the victims had been shot. There still was the question of the people who had been dismembered.
It is fairly clear to us there's another person out there killing people in a different manner for different reasons. And our job isn't done yet.
Your brother, did you know that he had guns and knives again in his
Yeah, he had guns.
Did it seem to you that was probably illegal?
It seemed strange to me. He asked me if I wanted to see his guns. I said no. I said, well, I just got on your handgun. He wanted me to see it. I said, okay. And then he had these handcuffs on. He put them on me. I said, these are nice. Would you like to take them off now? And he said, well, I'm going to show you what else I have. I said, take them off. You know, I got really uptight and started stomping my foot. Get him off, you know. So he unlocked them and took them off. He said I was just demonstrating.
And then I borrowed a Magnum. It's a great big old long gun with a 6-inch barrel on it.
So you bought them all legally?
Yeah. Paranoid about that shit. Somebody would mention it. The cops would start coming to look at me.
April of 1973, we were still solving all of these homicides, trying to put everything together. And I got a notification from our records section of a dealer's record of sale indicating that the handgun had been bought in the name of Edmund Kemper III. It's a quite large gun. That's a .44 Magnum, same gun that Dirty Harry used in all of those movies. Like I say, it's a huge gun. So when that record of sale came in, they matched it to this particular person that showed that he had been convicted of a double homicide a few years earlier, and that his juvenile record had been sealed. So that raises the question, does that mean that his prior convictions cannot be held against him? We're not sure of that, so we decided to confiscate that handgun until we could get a judicial decision. This fourplex on the left is 609 AB, and right there is 609A, where is the Kemper household. My partner and I go out to his house, and this car pulls up. I told my partner, I said, wait, let's go talk to this guy. So I go over there and I said, excuse me, can I talk to you for a second? And I identified myself. He said, sure, and he got out of the car. And he got out of the car. And he got out of the car. Because he was huge. We explained the situation to him. Very cooperative, very personable. He said, it's in the trunk. As he pulls the keys out to put him in the lock, my partner and I instinctively separated to each side of the car. He backed up. I opened up the trunk, and there was this gun. So I confiscated it, gave him the receipt. He told me later that had we not separated when he went to unlock the trunk, he was thinking about killing both of us.
Maybe it's just paranoia on my part, but once the gun was taken, I decided I was going to have to blow it and run. Suddenly, it just pops in my mind. The act of killing my mother.
My name is Don Smarto, and I'm a pastor in Dallas. I've been going into prisons for about 40 years, and I fundamentally believe that people can change. Part of what I would do is go into prisons, I would preach, I would share with inmates, and we would also film their testimonies of having found faith in God as Christians. February 10th, 1993 is a date that I will probably never forget. We were shooting in prisons in California, and the last prison was Vacaville. I had already shot 2 inmates, and the 3rd inmate walked into the room. He's 7 feet, 350 pounds. So I was obviously startled by his size, but I have no idea who he is or what he's done. Thank you for talking with us today. How long have you been in prison?
17 years.
You came to Christ in an unlikely place. Where was that?
In the hole, doing time in the lockup. I could just squander my life away, waste it away to nothing, quietly die in a little corner, or start living my life. And it was over a period of months. It was very ugly. It's the worst place I've ever lived in my life, and it's the best place I've ever lived, because during that 3 years there, I came to grips with myself, with my feelings, with who I was. I became a human being for the first time in my life, instead of a caricature.
During the break, a guard comes over and whispers in my ear, "You know who you're talking to, don't you?" To which I said, "No, I have no idea." He said, "That's Ed Kemper. He's the co-ed killer." I'd gained his respect, and we ended up writing to each other for 4 years. I kept them to myself for 27 years and showed them to no one. The first letter, he was formal, called me Mr. Smarto. After that, it quickly became Don. So I could tell that with each subsequent letter, we were developing a relationship. When I was corresponding with Ed, I never hesitated to ask any questions. I wanted to know if his spiritual conversion was real and that there really was a human inside what the world would say was a monster. Of course, the question that I really wanted to ask was about his mother. And so he says in this letter, "Dear Don, did you love your mother, you asked me?" That's a hard one. Instinctively, the answer should be yes. Yet I never felt that love. Do I remember that fateful night some 20 years ago? Of course, they never leave me. Memories etched in steel within my brain.
You said right at the beginning that you hadn't been sleeping lately because you've been thinking an awful lot about what you did, and
I've always had sweat. Like now talking with you, I get sweaty palms. Can you hear the cigarette? Sure, it'll probably end up running out. Quentin Bachman.
My dad interviewed Ed Kemper about a half a dozen times, and eventually Kemper opened up about the specifics of his murdering his mother. It is, an unspeakable crime, and what he did to his mother in terms of killing her was particularly unspeakable.
well, back to what we were talking about, which was your mother. What happened, like Good Friday?
I walked over to her bedroom and looked in. She was just finishing a book. They made her put the lights out. She saw me peek in. And I walked in. She said, "I guess you want to talk all night till morning now." And I said, "No, not really." I said, "We'll talk tomorrow." And I went back into my room and waited. I smoked cigarettes for another hour.
Ed told me, it goes back to his room, that one side of him is fighting with the other side. Whatever goodness is still there, and whatever darkness and evil is still there, are debating for hours. Should I go in and kill her? Should I not kill her? Should I kill her? Should I not kill her? And finally, the dark side wins.
I went back in the room. When she was sufficiently asleep, I walked up to her and looked at her for, God, it was a long 2 or 3 minutes. I started getting real nervous inside, very agitated. This has been a childhood fantasy of mine for many years. I was just about to do it. I had a knife in one hand and a hammer in the other. It was extremely sharp.
He goes in with a claw hammer and beats her to death in her sleep. And then, as if that wasn't enough, then he decapitates her.
I put the hammer down, got the knife, and cut her through it. And cut her head all the way off.
Then he cuts out her tongue which of course is an instrument we use to speak with. Then he removes her vocal cords and tries to put them down the garbage disposal.
The trachea was hanging out. I said, oh shit, I just threw it down the garbage disposal and turned it off. Now, poetically, that seems to be very just.
And then he tells me that he inserts his penis in her mouth and literally has sex with his mother's head.
Did you oral sex with the head?
That was one of my frustrated juvenile sick dreams.
Kemper murdering his mother is one of the most horrific things a human being can do to another. I mean, murdering your own mother, it certainly speaks volumes about their relationship. You know, I think my dad's conclusion was that was the source of all of Kemper's real issues, was his relationship with his mother.
In one of the letters he writes to me, I screamed at her lifeless head until my voice was painfully hoarse, sore, and exhausted, but satisfied. Yes, satisfied. He used the word he was exhausted, that it was over. His ultimate goal was to rid himself of the one person who had thrown him over the edge.
And what did you do?
Just started driving around. Left my car with all my guns in it. Got some more beer, got drunk. I left the next apartment about 10. Took off.
Did you know where you were going when you left?
Straight east. I drove for 28 hours straight in one stretch. I was taking no-dos like a champ, 4 and 5 of them at a time, and they keep them going. I could feel when they were losing their effect. I just take a few more.
What if the police had tried to pull you over?
I had 12 gauge shotgun, 30 caliber carbine. I was well enough equipped. Had over 200 rounds of ammo altogether. We had a good shot.
So it was Easter of 1973. It's a time for reflection and family and having some downtime, some relaxing time. And then the bubble breaks.
We just drove till I couldn't drive it. No limit. Didn't realize Colorado was so desolate out there. West side of the state. In fact, I think it might have had something to do with me blowing it, you know, just having to call the cops to come get me. After hitting those real high hills, I started thinking about turning myself in.
I was working at the police department from midnight to 8 in the morning, what we call a graveyard shift. Drinking coffee, it's dead, nothing happening. Suddenly the phone rings, and Andy, the officer working the radio, is talking to whoever is on the phone. He said something like, I'm not going to wake him up. You call back in the morning. Click, hung up.
I couldn't believe him that being noticed now. As it turned out, it was Tuesday morning and I still didn't know anything. What's going on?
Phone rings again. Andy says something to the effect, Ed, I have told you I'm not waking up the lieutenant. And I said, who are you talking to? He said, I'm talking to Ed Kemper. I took the phone and I said, hey, Ed, this is Connor. How you doing? He said, I know you guys. You guys know that I'm the one and you're all going to kill me. I know that. I said, Ed, I have not a clue what you're talking about. He said, well, I killed my mom and I just want to give myself up. I said, where are you? He said, I'm in Pueblo, Colorado. So now I covered the receiver. I told the other officer, call Pueblo PD and have them go out and hook this guy. I get a hold of Mickey and Luffy and I get him out of bed.
I answered the phone and it was Jim Connor. And he said, hey, do you know a guy named Ed Kemper? And I said, yeah, I just took a gun away from him about a week or so ago. And he said, well, he is now in Pueblo, Colorado, wants to turn himself in for a couple of murders. And he said to get a hold of you because you know exactly where he lives. So at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm standing there in my underwear on the telephone, and I can just feel the blood running all the way down. I was just cold all over. I want to get over to his house. Okay, the morning of the incident, this is exactly where I parked. And as I sit here now and look at this house, I mean, it's just like I was here last week, not almost 50 years ago. The duty sergeant at the time and myself did a canvass of the neighborhood to see if anybody had seen or heard anything suspicious. The people who lived upstairs said that they thought that there was kind of like a strange odor lately, the last day or two. Take a walk over this way. We went around the back of this complex and broke a window to gain access. Yeah, that's the fence back there with the gate and the window are just inside of it. When I walked in, you're hit with the smell. If you've ever smelled like a dead body, you'll never forget it, and that's what this was. And so we gave a cursory search to the inside of this apartment. When we got to the mother's bedroom, we went to the closet and opened the door, and there was a sheet. I'll never forget this. There was a sheet there, and when you pull it back a little bit, you could see flesh, hair, and blood. So that we've confirmed what the worst that could possibly happen. I waited until the crime scene people got there and other deputies and sergeants.
When we get to the bedroom, pull the bed from the wall and from where the pillows are to the floor is solid blood. There's actually, in the middle of the blood on the floor, there's a piece of paper that's kind of a half sheet like this.
Oh, I remember that. We found this confession Not sloppy and incompetent gents, just a lack of time. Got things to do. Approximately 5:15 a.m. Saturday. No need for her to suffer any more. Yeah, that was his note to us.
Further we went, we were pulling shoeboxes out of the end of the closet, and we are finding body parts. Arms, hands, feet, legs.
I went in there and I lift this towel up, and here's his face staring me right in the face. And it's his mother's severed head. It was just, let's put it this way, startling.
There are a lot of things that I wish I had never seen before and hope I never see again. So that's when we backed off. We went outside.
What we didn't know at the time, there was one more body in that house that we didn't find right away. It was her best friend who was found dead in the front closet by the front door, and she looked beat to death.
What about Sarah Howell?
Well, it was an alibi for my mother. So I thought, well, I could just leave and hope nobody gets wise, or I could invite one of her friends over. Well, a lot of times we'll take off somewhere on a day off. I'd take my friend with me, go up to the city shopping. So it wasn't a reason for her to be gone for the Easter weekend that would arouse suspicion. Got her in a chokehold and just picked her up in the air. She was dead 5 minutes later after she walked in the door.
These pictures are, it looks like the bloody bra we found. Also, we found the IDs and things of that nature of other victims. And it began to dawn on us that when we found stuff like that, he was the co-ed killer. Yeah.
Mickey Alufi and one of his co-workers had gone to Ed's house. So finally now we have a handle on maybe clearing some of these homicides, right? So I'm waiting for the Pueblo PD to show up. I said, you gotta give me a couple of minutes, Ed. We're talking, and he's telling me a little bit about how he killed his mom. Pretty soon he said, oh shit. I said, what? He said, the cops are here. So he dropped the receiver because I hear yelling in the background. You know, it was like, get on your hands and knees or something like that.
I was back at the sheriff's office, and I was on the telephone with the authorities in Pueblo, Colorado, when Peter Chang walked in. And that's when he asked me, he says, do you know this guy? Do you have a good rapport with him? I think so. So he said, okay, let's pack a bag and go to Colorado. When we get to Pueblo, Colorado, we check in at the police department, and then they brought Kemper in. And he looked at me and he says, hi, Mickey, how you doing? So that tells me right away that we do have that rapport. At least he recognized me and he's willing to talk to me. From there, the information just started flowing. And we talked to him for 4, 5, 6 hours. And he told us all about his victims. Locations of where he had disposed of bodies. And like stuff that we never even dreamed of.
Aptos, just a few miles south of Santa Cruz, where this morning about 5:30, county sheriff's investigators found the bodies of two women, one of them decapitated and her right hand cut off.
District Attorney Peter Chang was back in Santa Cruz today after talking to 6'9" giant Edmund Kemper in a Pueblo, Colorado jail. But Chang was giving out very little information about Kemper.
Well, depending on weather and what routes they may take, he'll be back anytime between Friday and Monday, and we intend Monday to take him to court and arraign him for murdering his mother and the second count for the murder of her friend.
After we interviewed him that night, we decided that we needed to get him back to California as soon as we can. I remember when we stopped at a gas station, and he had to use the facilities, and because of the notoriety of the case, by the time we came out of the restroom, there was a crowd there, and he would strut back and forth so these people could see him. He really enjoyed that. I was in the back seat with him. I was on the right and he was on the left for 3 days. And he was very jovial, very personable. The biggest thing that I gleaned out of that interviews and the time I spent with him was the fact that he was so matter of fact, that he had total recall, and that he felt no remorse whatsoever. I think those three things are probably the major things that I got out of that whole trip.
There is a strong possibility Kemper will be brought up to this general area of the Santa Cruz Mountains sometime this weekend.
Back in Santa Cruz, we asked him if he would be willing to show us where the bodies were, because a description of the area is not sufficient. You need somebody to say it's right there. And he agreed to do that because obviously families need to have some closure as well.
I was able to go out and find an arm that he had severed from Aiko Koo. And that was really the first time that we knew what had happened to her.
The way I found out about Aiko was through a newspaper article on this Edmund Kemper, and that he was responsible for taking Aiko's life. And when I read that article, I just broke down and I just cried and I cried and I cried. I just couldn't believe it. And I had a very hard time trying to understand what happened to my friend. There is a part of reliving the pain of her loss. But I have to say, there's also the joy in recalling such a wonderful friendship and such a wonderful experience that I had with Aiko for those years.
For the most part, it was amazing that he would do something like this close to his own home. One of his victims, he had buried her skull in his mother's backyard. And he told me that he had actually taken the face off of the skull, buried the skull, and put the face on top. And I asked him why he did that, and he said that because he wanted to know that she is always looking up at him.
Whose head was buried in the backyard?
That was Shaw. That was the fourth co-ed.
I remember just looking down into that hole and knowing that you know, there was a beautiful young lady once that I saw pictures of, and she met this horrific death. That was a difficult day. I thought about all these people that he had killed, and I thought, you know, if a judge ordered me to take him out to the river in the back of the courthouse and shoot him, I thought I could do it. I was that affected.
This is a day of waiting in Santa Cruz. Residents are watching carefully as sheriff's investigators and District Attorney Peter Chang begin to build a case against Edward Kemper III.
If you had written a fiction story of this, Edmund Kemper would not have been your supposed suspect, because there was nothing about him that was flamboyant or even noticeable. He was very quiet. He was the most unassuming 6'9" guy that there must have been. People who did know him couldn't make the connection. The other thing about Edmund Kemper is when you listen to him, he's extremely intelligent with a nice vocabulary and extremely well spoken. He's not the bad guy image that you would think.
We had to pick him up early in the morning, drive him to Santa Cruz to meet with his lawyers, spend all day in court, meet with his lawyers again, and we would drive him back to San Mateo. And we had to be careful. We could not instigate any conversation with him. But he's a talkative personality. He is a social person. He's always talking with us. I remember this lady driving in the lane next to us, and she's has her kind of head out the window drying her hair as we're driving along, and that really upset Ed Kemper, that she's not paying attention to her driving. She should get a ticket. You know, what is she thinking about? And I thought, wow, it's kind of a strange comment, thinking that she should get a ticket. This guy just killed 8 people, you know? It's like, where's the sense here?
I covered the trial, I covered all the hearings, and it's like anything else in life. When you show up at work, some days things affect you and some days they don't. And one day I turned around and I looked at, while they were going over the evidence, and I saw the father of one of the victims. I think it was Rosalind Thorpe's father. And the look on his face was of such agony. And it hit home, and I was in court and I started crying and I couldn't stop. Well, that's not a very professional image for a hard-bitten news reporter. So I was trying to hide it, but I couldn't stop the tears.
I was in the trial. People were shouting things like "kill the bastard" and all that sort of thing. Ed Kemper admitted to doing all of these things. His guilt was not a question. His sanity was the question. His defense team were indicating that he was insane and he did not know what he was doing. They were trying to prove that he had mental issues.
Well, you said you think you're sick. You think you're crazy?
Oh, yeah. But it's a sad thing.
My dad interviewed Kemper many times. The defense attorneys asked him to go see him and determine his level of sanity or insanity at the time of the crimes. And doing the Kemper interviews and studying his family and his history, I think really was a step forward for him in terms of understanding, especially the type of killer that Kemper was, which was very unusual. But there was one thing that he really didn't get to the bottom of, whether he was being truthful with my dad and expressing what he was really thinking. So he wanted to see if there were any repressed memories buried in his subconscious. So one of the things he did was administer sodium amytal, which is like a truth serum, just so he could try to get more into Kemper's subconscious to see if there was, any more there that wasn't coming out in the normal interviews.
What I do is I put the solution in slowly, and you just tell me how you're feeling.
It's slowly working its way up my arm. I get a tingling feeling in my nose. I came in very tense.
Yeah.
I was afraid of what was going to come out, and now I'm not really worried at all.
In order to administer the sodium amytal, Lundy had to make some arrangements with a local hospital. It was one of several different types of barbiturate type of substances that the military had tested out to see if it bypasses the cognitive guards and relaxes a person so that they will say more.
It's different today. It's all different. All of the sudden, my shit's out of the way. I kill people. I couldn't help it.
That was fortunate.
Aiko wrote, she's nice, but if I let her go, there was a good chance she'd tell on me, and that would be it. I already had some murders. I wanted to take some pictures of her so that it wouldn't happen again. I just look at the pictures. She had a lot of dances to go to and a big future. And I didn't want to hurt her by that point, but I'd already committed myself and had very hard, fast rules that I had to keep telling myself about. She was the only one I did really, just absolutely didn't want to hurt because of the way she was.
There's some guilt there mixed in with this bizarre need to kill somebody, kill a woman. There is a level where he seems to understand what he's doing is a horrible thing, but it's coming across as though he can't help himself. He has to.
Was eating the bodies, parsing the thighs.
At the time, immediately after killing?
No, I cut pieces off. Kept it for a long time before I ate any of them. The thing was, I didn't want to kill anybody else. Just frosting some of it and eating it.
But you tried to eat parts of a dead body to satisfy your drive to kill people.
It was erotic enough. Brought back a lot of feelings, brought back a lot of thoughts.
That would be a way of keeping yourself from having to have another victim by keeping part of the other victim and eating it.
It was just little chunks of meat.
Hearing him admitting to cannibalism, part of his need to possess. He's going to not just kill her and cut her into pieces, he's going to take part of her as if it brings her into him so that he can relive the experience of having had this power over her and that she now belongs to him.
I didn't have to be honest, and that's true. It's easy to lie. I don't want to lie. It's true. I have a feeling I'm on the tail end of my trip.
After interviewing Kemper, my dad was asked to give a report to the defense as to whether he felt Kemper was sane or insane. And the quandary my dad had was that by legal standards, Kemper was doing things that a rational human being would do. He was hiding his crimes, he was watching out for the police, he was thoughtful about how he committed his crimes. Because he understood what he was doing, it would be difficult from a legal perspective to say that he was insane. But from a psychological perspective, my dad felt that he was insane.
The California rule to test for sanity is what we call the McNaughton rule. All of the psychiatrists that interviewed him said that he knew what he was doing, and when he was doing it, he knew it was wrong, so therefore he was not insane.
In Santa Cruz, California, Edmund Kemper was convicted of killing 8 people, his mother and 7 other women.
At the end of the trial, Kemper was found guilty of 8 homicides and was sentenced to 7 years to life running concurrently, which essentially means that he would be there in state prison for the rest of his life.
So after the trial and he's found guilty, it's such a relief. I can't tell you what a feeling of relief there is. The prosecutors, they had a tough job because this is an expert witness case with, insanity and diminished capacity, and we all felt justice was served. We assumed that the death penalty would happen, but of course it never did.
Kemper was given the death penalty, and after he was sentenced to death by the judge, Harry Brower, the law changed and suddenly capital punishment was made illegal. So his penalty was transferred over to life in prison without parole.
I think it's a fair assessment to say that Edmund Emil Kemper III fooled a lot of people. It could be the psychiatrist at Atascadero, it could be law enforcement, it could be his mother, it could be his friends, but unfortunately it also included his victims, and that's the bad part.
Think he outsmarted you, Mickey?
That calls for a real honest answer, doesn't it? Yeah, he definitely slipped through the cracks.
Kemper is serving a life sentence in the Correctional Medical Facility at Vacaville, California. He's kept in a segregated wing with just a few other inmates.
All these years, he's been in the very same prison. It's been almost 50 years. He is 73 now, has had a severe stroke, is debilitated. He is shut down. He doesn't talk to anybody, he doesn't talk to reporters, to media, to writers. He's just decided to be a recluse. So when I interviewed Ed Kemper on camera, I may literally have the last communication he's given to any person or the world.
As you know, much has been written about you. When you first came to prison, you were described as a monster, a maniac. How different is the Ed Kemper before our camera today?
A very large person, 6'9". And you would think someone that large is going to be prone toward violence and aggression and overbearing personality. And I'm working toward quite the opposite. So I would say the difference between 16, 17 years ago, where I was considered friendly, an easygoing person, that was a facade. Now it's real.
Ed Kemper is a very complex person. He realizes that all his life he has fought inside himself with both the good Ed Kemper and the evil Ed Kemper. But now he has found peace. He has found peace with God. One of the things he told me was if he ever got paroled, he'd want to be a missionary. He would visit inmates who were dying of AIDS and he'd minister to them. And I think, in a sense, in his own way, he was trying to say, maybe to the world, there is some good in me. I do like helping others. Visiting sick inmates gives me comfort, my hope to bring a modicum of comfort. Is this self-redemption? Am I just a do-gooder? I need to believe something in me is salvageable. The question I think people are going to ask me in the future is, do you believe you'll see Ed in heaven? And my answer is yes. And I can't see in someone's heart. I mean, I only God knows. But based upon what I've seen, I believe I'll see him in heaven someday. Let me tell you, that is going to anger people to no end.
I don't believe that redemption is possible. I've heard that a lot. I think that it's a way that they tell themselves that they are different people, but they're not, you know? No matter what he does, he can say, maybe he has found peace. If he has, that doesn't make me feel particularly good. I don't want him to find peace. I haven't found peace. They never will find peace. Well, who can redeem Roz? Who can redeem Alice? You know, they're dead. Nothing will bring them back.
I think if any homicide investigator tells you that it doesn't affect you, then I don't think they're being honest, because at some level, it's in you. It's in my mind. I don't think about it all the time, but it does come to me sometimes. For what these women had to go through, I can't get that out of my head. There's just things you just can't get it out. And it just comes back once in a while. But you learn to deal with it.
The impact that those murders had on Santa Cruz County is something that never should have happened. But I'm glad to say that we all got through it okay. I mean, it is a point in history that we'll probably never forget. Ed Kemper is having to pay for what he did, and I'd have to confess, whenever I drive by Vacaville State Prison, I kind of think about him a little bit, but then I keep going.
I always had a big fantasy with little girls. It was one thing I couldn't handle. They didn't relate me to the co-ed killer until they found themselves being killed. Well, expecting to last longer on my little trip of killing co-eds. Did I see you running out of tape?